Share. Share.
Wenn ich gehe zu Pesach Sheni, ist auch da sehr wenig Kolponen gedruckte Marmorim. Und Marmori Rabbeinu Nisiyenu, Achus gezählte Mamosh, mit sehr Mispor bekamus Mamosh, und was in See ist Eichet, weniger die, was ein sich Misasik bei See, und lernen sie auch bis in ein Leben von Meilen sein bei sie, aber Pi, was lechere, wie bald das ein neuer Indien, was wird mehr nicht wie Merumas, und gedruckt der geworden Lachrein, hat das gedacht, Areisruf Maisaninus Miyochodo, und befragt hat dort die Gordo Apelle Hachi Gordo. wie belarben geht zu Kamme in Jonim, am Hebton von Dover Hakore wie Lov, ist auch Pi, was in meinem Morim ist doch, nicht wie wir sehen, Misport, ist auch da, aber auch Hiro, Bruro, in der meisten Bepeil von der Siedlereino, was gesagt, wenn geht zu Pesach Sheni, und hat es geheißen, mit Parsen sein, Wiesen abdrucken und mit Parsen sein und voneinander schicken, bekommen wir ein Hero, Bruder, nicht ein Hero, was wir da suchen, was sie kommen, das verteidigen. Und abteichen, mal abkommen, in der meisten Befehl steht begonnen. Aber der Linie von Pesach Sheni ist, als sie nicht auch in Verfallen.
Can you all see me? Okay. Yichiyad Oneinu Ben Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach Le'olam Vad. Yechi Adonai Namin Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach Leilam Vod. Yechi Adonai Namin Rabbeinu Melech Mashiach Leilam Vod. Welcome to the 29th annual conference of the Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib Research Institute on Mashiach and the Sciences. In a few minutes, I'm going to give some background who Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib was and what the Institute is all about and how it came to be. But first, I want to mention that this is Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib's yortzeit right now. Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib ben Kvod Kedushas Rabbi Lev Yitzchak, the Rebbe Melech Mashiach's brother. As yortzeit, Yud Gimel Iyar. Yud Gimel is Gematria Echad. There are a few yortzeits that happened on the 13th of the month. Gematria Yud Gimel Gematria Echad. There's a Tzemach Tzedek, Yud Gimel Nisan. The Rebbe Marash, Yud Gimel Tishrei. And there's a famous word that those two yortzeits are connected, as indicated in the pasuk, Echad be'echad yigoshu. Echad b'Nisan, that's the Tzemach Tzedek, Yud Gimel Nisan. Echad b'Tishrei, that's the Rebbe Marash. Exactly 6 months apart, years later, of course. But the point is that there was a close, very, very close connection between the Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe Marash. And he was the youngest son, but he had a special connection to the Tzemach Tzedek more than the other sons. And of course, he is the one who became the Rebbe after the Tzemach Tzedek. Now, Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib's yortzeit is Yud Gimel Iyar. Yud Gimel is also Gematria Echad. And there's a sikha from sometime back in the Mems where it's not Muga. Most of the sikha is Muga, but not this part. But in the Hosafos, it quotes it that the Rebbe Melech Mashiach said, say the same thing applies to Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib. Yortzeit Yud Gimel Iyar. Yud Gimel is Gematria Echad, also part of the Echad Be'echad Yigoshu. And L'ha'ir, in the biographies of Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib, it mentions that his father, Rabbi Lev Yitzchak, once said that Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib has the Tzemach Tzedek's cup. He has the Tzemach Tzedek's head, Tzemach Tzedek's mind. Iyar, Yud Gimel Iyar. So Iyar is the famous Roshei Tevos, Aleph Yud Yud Reish, standing for Ani Hashem Rofecha. Now this is something that we, the Yidden, B'miuchad, and the world as a whole needs tremendous refuah. Everybody knows what's going on. And now is the time for it. Ani Hashem Rofecha. Hashem will certainly bring the refuah shlema for all Yidden and for all mankind in this month and in this day, on this day. I would like to mention especially our friend and colleague, Professor Yirmiyahu Branover, Shikha, Yirmiyahu ben Devora, the refuah shlema. He's been sick a long time, way, far too long years, with various neurological problems, nothing to do with the virus. But he's basically paralyzed and incommunicative. And it's vade that we'll all agree that this man has done so much for Yiddishkeit and Yidden, and especially Russian Jews, helping them come out of Russia and get settled in Eretz Yisrael, and inspiring. He's one of the inspirations of our organization, Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib Institute, inspiring the study of Torah and lahavdil science, how there's no problem, there's no real contradiction if you learn Torah, kipshuto, and you learn science honestly. A lot to say about that. But Yirmiyahu ben Devora should have a full shlema. About Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib. Personally, he was the youngest brother of the Rebbe Melech Mashiach. He was a special person. There's a story that once when he was a very little boy, one of the Gaonim was visiting Rabbi Lev Yitzchak's home, and little Yisrael Ayaleib was sitting at the end of the table with Mishnayos open in front of him, looking at it. So at one point, the Rav, this Gaon, he said jokingly to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, does he know what's going on there? He's looking at the page. Does he know what he's reading? So Rabbi Levi Yitzchak told Yisrael Ayaleib to say what he's learning. And he said over the whole thing brilliantly and in detail. Very impressive. Also in his youth, when he was a teenager, there's a famous story that Rabbi Simchana wrote in her memoirs about Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib as follows. The Chassid Simcha Gorodetsky, was the shliach of the Frierdiker Rebbe to, among other things, raise money for the Tomchei Tmimim Yeshiva in Lubavitch. And he would travel around as the mashpia and also to raise money. You know, expression, plant ruchnius and harvest gashmius. One year during the 9 days before Tisha B'Av, he was visiting at the home of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. And one night while he was there, Rabbi Simchana approaches Rabbi Simcha Gorodetsky and says to him, "Come here, I want to show you something." She takes him to Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib's room, where Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib is sitting by a table learning Gemara. And she starts calling his name. Label. No response. Now, of course, it's not unusual for a teenager that his mother calls him and he pretends like he doesn't hear. So what was going on here? So she goes, takes it with Simcha Gorodetsky into the room. She goes up to him close and calls label, and pulls on his sleeve like to get his attention. And they see that he is totally oblivious to what's going on around him. He doesn't even know that anybody's there. So this is what Reb Simchana wanted to demonstrate. She turns to Reb Simcha and says to him with a big smile, "You see the shekida of my son Label? You see the diligence of my son Label?" He was like that. And I'll tell one more story along those lines from later in his life, when he, after all the things going on in Russia and in Europe and the war, and he managed to get out of Europe and get to Eretz Yisrael. He settled in Tel Aviv. At that time, he made connection with other Chabad Hasidim in Tel Aviv, and his chavrusa, he made a chavrusa in Hasidus with the famous Chassid Reb Nachum Goldschmidt. Now, Reb Nachum Goldschmidt is most famous probably for his Perush on the Tanya, which is extremely, wonderful, brilliant Perush, the Shiurim on the Tanya. So they happen to be childhood friends from Yekaterinoslav, Reb Nachum Goldschmidt and Yisrael Ayaleib. So they started a chavrusa together. Now, this story I heard from the son of an eyewitness to it. The eyewitness was the son of Reb David Goldschmidt, who was Rosh Hashiva in Eretz Yisrael, and I heard the story from his son, Reb David Goldschmidt, the shliach here in New York. By the way, I'm speaking to you from Crown Heights, Ir Habira, Rebbe Melech Mashiach's capital, and this is going all over the world. We'll talk about that too. So they used to learn together. So Reb Nachum's son was a little boy at the time, and he would, play around. So he would tell that he would come in the morning and see them sitting down together, Reb Nachum and Reb Yisrael Ayaleib, and starting to learn, and then they would just stop talking and quietly put their head down like this on their hand, and basically what he described as thinking to each other. Okay, and they'd stay like that for a long time. So the little boy is playing. He comes back hours later in the afternoon, and he sees that they're both still sitting like that in the same position. There's a lot of shkita going around there, a lot of diligence, and maybe just will helping that I should have efres katsehu, of a drop of that. I mean, a little more than a drop, a few ounces, I'll call him, to do the work that I have to do. Well, eventually, Rabbi Yisrael Ayaleib, in 1948, Tavshin Ches, he was in the Eretz Yisrael, and he got an offer from the University of Liverpool to be to have a position in the Department of Physics. Now, he was a mathematician by profession. He learned on his own. He learned at a school in Leningrad for a time. But he was a brilliant mathematician, and he was given this offer. And what is the first thing he did? What's the first thing a chassid does when he's offered a major position, or even something, any position? He writes to the Rebbe. So he wrote a letter to the Frierdiker Rebbe. And this letter, if you've ever seen this Kovitz, Yud Gimel Iyar Arboim Shana, which was put out for the 40th Yortzeit of Rabbi Yisrael, which was in Tavshin Nun Beis, the letter is reprinted there, the Frierdiker Rebbe's answer to his letter. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, first of all, addresses him with extraordinary titles that, as Rebbe Milcham Shech once said, that the Frierdiker Rebbe did not throw around titles, carelessly. He addresses him as, the letter is dated Yud Zayin Kislev Hei Tov Shin Ches. And the Frierdiker Rebbe addresses Rabbi Yisrael Eileb as Yedidi Nachad Dikni Zik, something like that. Mechutoni Anichpad Bal Kishoro Nela Vosik L'Chosid Ish Yirei Elokim Mar Leib Sheyichya. Shalom Abracha. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe tells him to take the position and gives him a shlichus there. He says, when you get to England, start looking into making translations of Chassidus. He said, we need a translation of the Tanya into English. We need a translation of stories about the Baal Shem Tov, biography of the Baal Shem Tov, Talmidim, Baal Shem Tov and their biographies, and so on. To translate them to English, Ha'atoka Chovshis im Ha'oros Tochnios B'nogea LeHavonos V'Inyanim B'Tochonam. A readable translation with notes that make it easier to understand. So he was given, Rabbi Yisrael was given a shlichus to make contact with the Balei Lashon, people who had good command of the English language. They're in England and they knew Hebrew. They're able to work on translating these for him. Well, but unfortunately, first of all, this was 1948. Rabbi Yisrael did not, because the war broke out in Eretz Yisrael, so Rabbi Yisrael didn't get to England until a couple of years later. And then a couple of years after that, in Tavshin Yud Beis, 1952, he had a heart attack and he passed away. He's buried in Sfas. And I will just tell you that the story, when I heard the story of his life, now, he was not well known until like the Toshin Mems, when the Rebbe Milcham Shech would make Farbrengens and say Mamorim, and eventually published Kuntus Yud Gimel Iyar, which made essentially Yud Gimel Iyar a day on the Chabad calendar, not just a day when a certain event came. Like there's other important dates of Yortzeits and birthdays of major Hasidim, but if you call it Kuntus Yud Gimel Iyar, it's like saying Kuntus Chof Dalet Teves, like that the Alter Rebbe's Yortzeit and Chof Dalet Teves made the whole day a special day, the whole day, and not just that a special event took place. Kuntus Yud Gimel Iyar means Yud Gimel Iyar, Echad Iyar, is a special day for Chabad, for all Yidden. And that was David Rabbi Yisrael Yortzeit. Well, when I first heard about his life story, you see, I am a mathematician by profession, and so is Rabbi Yisrael, and I like to learn Chassidus, although I can't compare myself to him, but, he was Mosav V'Nosun L'Chassidus, Limen L'Chassidus, like you see with Shkida, and I was also, at that time, given over to learning Chassidus, ad kedei kach, that I even considered giving up mathematics, is so many people who learned in universities wanted to do, and some of them did do this. They gave up their profession and devoted themselves to learn Chassidus, and I wanted to do that too. And of course, as in most cases, Rabbi Melcham Mashiach told me not to do that. I'm just saying that when I heard about Rabbi Yisrael Leib, how it was the profession of the mathematics and the Mesira and Nesina to learn Chassidus were mixed together, embodied in one person, it was an inspiration for me. Just telling you that, the Pshuta Mamash. So, therefore, in Toshin Nun Beis, which was Rabbi Yisrael Leib's 40th year at site, 1992, I had the idea to make a conference on, Torah and science, especially as regards chinuch, where the whole Torah and science things becomes very touchy, very tricky, and sometimes very dangerous. And you're talking about Talmidim at the age of education, what they experienced then and what they learned then, and the attitudes that are presented to them then shaped their whole lives. So I had the idea to make such a conference and to bring especially Paul Rosenblum, Olav Shalom, Pesach Rosenblum, and he's the man. He was a very big math professor, world renowned, and bring him out. He's the one to whom the Rebbe Melcham Mashiach gave a transcript of Rabbi Yisrael Leib in mathematics for Rosenblum to translate it from German to English and to edit it and put footnotes on it, like you see in that letter from the Friedrich Rebbe. Footnotes were very important by the Rebbeim. And he wanted Rosenblum to publish it in a mathematical journal. And you've probably seen the video of the dialogue between the Rebbe Melcham Mashiach and Professor Rosenblum in, I think it was Yud Shvat Tavshin Lamed Hey, something like that, where they're talking to each other about it in English. And Rosenblum was a little reluctant. But then, as Rosenblum later told me, when he was telling me over the whole story, he said he finally realized that the Rebbe Melcham Mashiach wanted this paper published. It had some personal meaning to him. It was only then that the Rebbe Melcham Mashiach told Rosenblum that it was written by his brother, by Rabbi Yisrael Leib. Until then, he didn't say that. And Rosenblum himself told me that his own impression, because Rebbe Melcham Mashiach had sent him the paper in the mail before this dialogue, he told me that his own impression was that it was written by a Russian mathematician, contemporary, who was imprisoned somewhere in the Gulag in Siberia, whatever, and had just had written it in his years of prison, and that's why there were no footnotes and no references to any other current mathematics going on. That's what he assumed. He had no idea that this was from the Rebbe Melcham Mashiach's brother. So in Toshin Nun Beis, I had the idea to make this conference, and actually, to make this story a little bit shorter, I was not able to get an answer from the Rebbe Melcham Mashiach then. As you know, this was right after Chav Zayin Adar. We're talking about Yud Gimel Iyar, just a little bit after Chav Zayin Adar. And I didn't get an answer, but I consulted with the Shliach where I was living, Rav Moshe Feller, that is in Minnesota. And I said to him, I want to do this. Should we do this? So he said, there was really no way to get an answer from the Rebbe Melcham Mashiach at that time. So he said, look, we make events all the time. We make Fabrengens all the time. What's the shaila? So we did. We made this event, and it was very successful. The next year, Tafshin Nun Gimel, 1993, my family and I had moved here to Crown Heights, where we've been ever since. And at that time, things were eased up. You could write in questions to Rabbi Mashiach and get answers, you know, by Rabbi Mashiach nodding yes or not, or shaking his head no. You know about this. So I wrote into the Rabbi Mashiach and asked explicitly if I should make another conference on Yud Gimel Iyar, Crown Heights, Yud Gimel Iyar, for the 41st Yortzeit, like I did the previous year in Minnesota. And the answer was yes. And from that I understood that it's not just a one-time thing you do, not just a one-time event, but it has to be a pulot imshachas. That if you did it once, then you do it again. 40th Yortzeit is a milestone. 41st Yortzeit is like just another year. But we've been doing it ever since then, every single year. Ad hayom hazeh. This is the 29th. Now this year things are a little different. Previous years we would make it in various cities in the United States, in Canada, and Eretz Yisrael. Recently, most recently, I would say maybe up past 8 years, I think, we've been making them in Eretz Yisrael. Mostly in Beersheba, because that's where my colleagues who helped me with organize it live. And twice we made it on the campus of Hebrew University in Yerushalayim. Something a little different this year because of the world situation. We can't make it in one centralized place anywhere in the world. So looks like that's a chisaron. But really, as the expression goes, gam zoom letova, right? Not just gam zoom letova, but with a mem at the end. Gam zoom. That's what you're saying right now. Gam zoom letova. Everything has, every Yerida is tzarech aliyah. There's a big mila to what we're doing now, because since we were not able to make it anywhere in the world, we had to make it everywhere in the world. There's no place on the face of the earth that a person cannot contact, cannot log in. And I see from the millions of participants listed on the sidebar over here, well, yeah, we're getting there. Not quite a million yet. But we have speakers also from the whole world, ranging from Toronto, Canada, to Cape Town, South Africa, and Eretz Yisrael, of course. A few from Eretz Yisrael. Okay. I just want to say a word or two about the theme of the conference. The theme of the conference, if you've seen the notice, is fight COVID, not each other. Now, where did I get that from? And how does it connect with Torah and science, and with Mashiach and science, and with Mashiach Leib Institute, and so on? One of the things that didn't make big news, because it wasn't about the virus per se, but it's several weeks ago, the Secretary General of the United Nations made a call to all the nations of the world. Now, listen, I know, you know, we all know that people don't pay much attention to what the Secretary General of the United Nations says, right? He's always making this and that. But you also know that in 1992, when the heads of state of all the members of the Security Council got together at the UN here in New York, which was actually the first time ever that all the heads of state got together there at the same time, and they made this announcement of they want to stop warfare and start a new era and help each other. Nations should help each other instead of, you know, being rivals of each other. Help each other instead of hurting each other. Well, I tell you, if I had seen that as a headline on the newspaper that day, I would have paid no attention to it. You know, kol shi kalam, like they say in Arabic. It's just talk. The next day, however, the Rebbe Melech Mashiach made a major sicha out on this, and this is a bombshell. You can't use any weaker word than a bombshell. He described that meeting at the UN in detail, and what they decided and what they announced. And he said that this is the beginning of the famous nevuah of Yeshayahu in Perek Beis, V'chitzu charosam le'itim v'chanisosem lemazmeros, lo yisagoyel goy cherev v'lo yilmadu od milchama. Swords into plowshares. And in fact, the United Nations, when it was founded, they have a wall out there in it's called the Isaiah Wall, where this pasuk is in big letters, engraved on the wall in big words. And the Rebbe Milchem Mashiach mentions that wall in the Sikha, in one of the footnotes. So the Rebbe Milchem Mashiach says it's the beginning of a new era of the fulfillment of this nevuah of swords and the plowshares. So this announcement a couple of weeks ago by the Secretary General of the UN, it hit me as a new shlav, a new stage, like a new phase in the development of swords into plowshares. And indeed, it was later reported that there were some of the military conflicts going on in various places in the world where they responded to this call and they worked out their differences chick-chock, real quick, and made peace. So fight COVID, not each other. I mean, this is basically what the Secretary General of the UN said. Stop all armed conflicts and start working together to fight the virus. That was his call to the nations. We will focus a little bit on swords. One of the focal points of our Moshiach and Science work is swords into plowshares. Why? Swords into plowshares is not just a political thing, it's a technological thing. They're going to beat their swords into plowshares. The sword is not just a sword. A sword is a muscle for all military weapons, most of which in recent times have been high-tech, nuclear technology, laser technology, with a lot of computer technology, satellite technology. A lot of this, since the announcement of the Rebbe Milchem Mashiach Sikha, there's been a tremendous amount of conversion of this military technology to peaceful uses. And that's one of our jobs at the Rabbi Shlomo Leib Institute, is to track that as much as possible. So I wrote a book. You may or may not know about it, but it's called Scientific Thought, Messianic Times. And there's a chapter 3 there. The whole thing is about swords into plowshares, and there's, I think, 170 pages there about it. But that's nothing. There are organizations documenting the transformation of military resources, military bases, military technology to peaceful uses. And these are not religious organizations. They're not looking to promote anything. These are basically social science organizations. They're what's going on in the world? Is the world a good place, a bad place? What's happening? Okay. In fact, I've just mentioned, before I move on, that there's a company established in England called Plowshares Innovations. How about that? And they say beferish that their goal was to follow the swords into plowshares transformation, and they take the technology developed by the British Department of Defense or Defense Ministry, and they transform it or whatever they do, whatever find a popular need for it in the civilian population, and they make it available and do what they have to do to make it available to the public for peaceful or healthful or economic benefits, peaceful purposes. We're a little concerned about China. China is one of the 5 permanent members on the UN Security Council. So that means that they were involved in that declaration in 1992. You see, there's 15 members on the Security Council, but only 5 of them are permanent. The other 10 are rotating positions. China is one of the 5 permanent members. Of all the permanent members, the 3 out of 5, there's no shaila that they're on board with the swords and the plowshares without without stepping back. I can show you graphs that show that what's called their militarization index, that for England, France, and the United States, it's gone down. Even for China, it's gone down. But for Russia, it went up and down, up and down, up. Overall, it's a little bit up. So I was watching Putin very carefully for the past couple of years and see, is he a good guy or a bad guy? And I concluded he's a good guy. You know, in the West, United States and Western Europe, it's popular to demonize him. And especially in America here, if you don't demonize Putin, that means you're part of the conspiracy of Trump and the Russians to steal the election from Hillary Clinton, whatever. That if you've been following that, you see you see when the Tsar says it's Alma de Shikra, you get a new window opened up into that. But China's different. China's not been militaristic very much, even though they show off their military a lot, especially in the South China Sea. But without going into that too much, it's really a bluff, because what they're really interested in is money and subtle power. Okay, they do want to, you might say, bluntly, take over control of the world, but they have no intention of doing this militarily. They do this by other means. A lot of intellectual property is stolen from the United States by China. A lot of hacking has gone on. This corporation Huawei is they're a bad actor. The United States is trying to get, military positions and academic positions in the United States not to use the Huawei computer system, because that's what they have, stuff built into the system that steals information. That's how you do all this intellectual property theft, to steal it from the American users and use it in China. We've suffered tremendous losses that way. Okay, I will just say about that, it's not a good thing, but it is a good thing that they're not doing any military adventurism. And in my opinion, this is my personal shot in the pasuk. It says, "Lo yisa goy al goy cherv v'lo yomadu od milchama. V'chitzu chavrosam le'itim v'chanisosem mazmeros. Lo yisa goy al goy cherv v'lo yomadu od milchama." What's the logic of the order of the things in those pasuk? They're going to beat their swords into plowshares. Then they're not going to fight. Then they're not even going to learn any more war. It seems a little bit out of order. First, it should say they're going to stop fighting. Then, like the Radak said, since they don't need weapons anymore because they're not fighting, then they beat the swords into plowshares. And then what does exactly it mean they won't learn any more warfare? So I think, first of all, even after, the first thing that comes is swords into plowshares. The process begins. That already has begun. The Melch Mashiach clearly says that it's not complete yet. That's what the Gula Shlema, but it has begun. Second step is Lo Yisa Goyal Goycherav. They're actually going to stop wars, all wars. Now, that's a second phase of swords into plowshares. But even though they will stop Lo Yisa Goyal Goycherav, they will not raise swords against each other. There are other ways of fighting, like what the Chinese are doing. And actually, every country does this to a certain extent. Hacking into another country's security computer systems, maybe like China likes to do, steal intellectual property that way, interfere with elections. If you've listened in America, what's going on past few years, there's this horrible accusation that Russia and China were interfering in our elections and trying to affect the outcome. Okay, the truth is, nobody mentions, but you look further into this, you see, every single country in the world does that a little bit to a certain extent. number one. Number two, on the other hand, it's not that easy to affect an election by just changing a few votes in a voting machine in Kansas. You know, that's not going to affect the whole country. Okay, but my point is, lo yilmadu od milchama. Even after they stop fighting militarily, they will still be doing yilmadu. Right? There'll be intellectual cyber warfare. There'll be intellectual means of rivalry, of competing unfairly with each other, and stuff like that. The third stage of the swords into plowshares process is v'lo yilmadu od milchama, that will also stop. And then finally, all the nations of the world will live together in peace and harmony, just like all the Nevuos of Yeshayahu and all the other Nevi'im. And David Avdi Nasi Lahem La'olam, one king over the whole world. That's Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach. L'hoya Hashem LaMelech Al Kol Haaretz B'Yamhu Hashem Echad L'Shmo Echad. Now, let me go to our first speaker, which is, I must confess that these are not live speeches. I'm live. You see me, hear me moving, waving to you. But because of the time differences of the speakers, and also because of wanted to make sure that there would be no glitches in the technology and trying to reach somebody at the right time to make sure he's on live, we asked the speakers to record. And so to record videos of the presentation, so that's what you're going to see. And between each of the lecturers, I'll give a few comments. But the guest lecturers are by video, pre-recorded. So in the first, we're going to start with the Dvar Torah. Post going to be Dvar Torah. We're going to call on Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Silman from South Africa, Cape Town, South Africa, who is my son, and he's a shliach there. And he has started recently, past couple of years, giving a WhatsApp group open to anybody and everybody, where he gives a summary of the Shir Rambam Hayomi, Perek Echad Layom, of the chapter of Rambam in the one chapter a day schedule. He gives a summary of that perek in English, in simple English, easy to understand. So I'm going to bring him on to give his shir on the Rambam Hayomi. Okay.